So now I want to discuss the question of the Scottish referendum from a Muslim perspective, and I'm sharing this again in a spirit of love and hopefully goodwill, just simply trying to get to the truth as I can see it. And just to explain, I've been involved in Islamic studies for many years at quite a senior level. Obviously, as part of my degree at the University of London, I studied Middle Eastern politics in great detail, including the Balkans region and the whole Ottoman Empire, and have travelled widely throughout the Balkans and in Morocco and Israel and Palestine, and about to go to Turkey and Istanbul. Now, I've been interested in Islam for many years as a philosopher of religion, and particularly in Sufism, which is a tradition I've spent many years studying and to some extent practicing. I taught at the Muslim College in London under Dr. Zaki Badawi for several years, and have met many senior Muslim scholars from around the world, from the Arab world, the Turkish community, from North Africa, from Egypt, and from India, and worked in interfaith relations with Muslim scholars. Now, obviously, my understanding of Islam is that it's fundamentally a peace-loving religion, and having studied the life of Muhammad in very great detail, and the early caliphs and the early descendants of the Prophet, and both the Sunni and the Shia traditions of Islam, and the other branches of Islam, Ismaili, and so on. It is my conclusion that Islam is absolutely a peace-loving religion, and the violence that it's sadly sometimes associated with is fundamentally due to a misreading of the Quran and a misreading of the Hadith, and a misunderstanding which goes back to conflicts, to splitting that occurred very early on in the Islamic community. It was brewing even before the death of Muhammad, and conflicts between Aisha, his last wife, who was quite young, very young when he married her, and then Ali, who was his chief lieutenant and son-in-law, married to his daughter Fatima. There was a personality clash and a power clash between Aisha and Ali that already brewed in the lifetime of Muhammad, and tragically after his death, it led to serious problems, and eventually to conflict and open struggle and violence, and eventually concretized in the form of the Shia-Sunni split, which still bedevils Islam right up to this day. Now, this split that occurred in Islam is really regarded as the tragedy that affected Islam by all serious scholars who got into this. And I've spoken to philosophers of Islam, people like Sayyid Hossein Nasr and others, and if you read the writings of all serious Islamic scholars and historians of philosophy, they will say, the greatest tragedy that befell Islam and why it has been bedeviled by conflict internally, why we're looking at conflict in Iraq and Syria and other Islamic states, is because of this unresolved conflict between the Shias and the Sunnis. The true Muslims, in my opinion, stand above and beyond that conflict, and they would be the Sufis, the philosophers, the sages. And they're sadly not given as much publicity and not given as much preeminence. But if you really go into Islamic philosophy and history, as I have done, and as other scholars have done, you will, I think, confirm what I'm saying here. A true Muslim is someone who is going to be submitted to the absolute, and their will be blended in harmony with the will behind the entire cosmos, the universe, and they regard the revelations of the Quran received through Muhammad as a guidance on how to surrender, align and adjust one's will to that divine harmony. And it's not about fear, it's not about threats, it's not about terror, it's about joy and love. One submits to the absolute because one loves the universe, one loves the creator of the universe, because one loves God as the beloved, as the source. We all know as humans the experience of loving each other as special partners, consorts, husbands, wives, families, children, etc. But imagine loving the source of all that. So the intensity of the love that a true Muslim or a sage feels for the creator of the universe is enormous. And the one thing that I think a Muslim surely should struggle against, and this is the inner meaning of the word jihad. Jihad doesn't mean fighting for, a kind of religion like a club, like a tribal identity. It doesn't mean, careering around on the battlefield to promote one's own tribe or religion at the expense of others, who are genuine believers in their own light and their own revelations. A true Muslim would engage in interfaith dialogue and mutual respect, and I've met many great Muslim scholars who've been engaged in these philosophical dialogues. I've just been in Cordoba in Spain discussing the work of Ibn Arabi and Ibn Rushd and these great mystics and scientists and philosophers from the past. They didn't engage in violent polemics. They engaged in rational, humble dialogue towards ultimate truth. Now, so I think splitting and breaking up polities and countries is to be engaged in by Muslims with very, very great caution. If you look at what's happening in Syria at the moment, it's an absolute, utter, total tragedy. I've been trying to communicate with the Foreign Office an alternative way of peace making, that Britain and the UK and the Commonwealth and the European Union could actually be intervening as mediators in this tragic civil war that's going on. I don't believe we should be taking sides with this or that faction. We should be saying, look, it's in the best interests of the Mediterranean region as a whole, of the Middle East as a whole, that peace should come to Syria. And we shouldn't be taking sides with this or that faction. Certainly not extreme Muslim factions that are promoting violence and a misunderstanding of the concept of jihad. Now, and I would say the same in other Islamic states such as Iraq and Afghanistan. I think Britain should have been pursuing a peace policy here. And this is something I've advocated for the last 10, 15 years. Now, when it comes to the Scottish referendum on independence, I can't see that a Muslim would wish to separate the United Kingdom into separate pieces and help dismember what has succeeded as a state and a country and a civilization for many centuries, and for good and ill has ruled a large part of the world, and for many years helped, as it were, keep the peace and moderate the cultures of large parts of the Middle East, of Iraq and of Egypt and Sudan and all the way through to India and Pakistan. And there was a great respect between Islamic civilization and British civilization. Many scholars, many founders of Islamic countries came to Britain. They studied at Cambridge or Oxford, like the founders of Pakistan. And many great poets, many philosophers have studied in British institutions of higher learning. And in Scotland as well, there have been great centres for Islamic studies at the University of Edinburgh with H.A.R. Gibb and Montgomery Watt. You know, some of the greatest scholars on Quran and Islamic studies have been from Scotland and working in academia here. But also, there are great centres of Islamic expertise in Oxford and Cambridge and Exeter University and Lampeter and London University, particularly at SOAS. And at the Muslim College where I taught with Dr. Zaki Badawi. The question then, if you're a Muslim facing the choice, the difficult ethical choice of whether to vote for a new state coming into being, Scotland, and the breaking up of the United Kingdom, I would have thought that the United Kingdom as a whole can be of more help to advance the cause of peace and justice in the world in its integral state, kept together. I mean, there are quite a lot of Muslims living in Britain as a whole. There are over 1 million Muslims resident in the UK, and the very, very vast majority are highly industrious, learned, and highly, active citizens committed to helping the United Kingdom play its role in the world as a peace-loving and progressive country. and many senior Muslims engaged in interfaith dialogue have been active in helping British policy. Now, and one hears recently that some senior Muslims have been declaring the kind of jihadist element that think it's a great idea to go to Syria and fight against the government, and then maybe even to export those ideas back to Britain. Actually, moderate Muslims in Britain are beginning to speak out and say this is non-Islamic. As I say, as a philosopher, I would say that the point of Islam is an inner struggle for unity. And that requires, in a sense, appreciating the diversity of our being, understanding the complexity of the archetypes that we all embody, but then realizing that underlying them all there's a unity which is underscored and guaranteed by the Absolute, by Allah, by God. There is a kind of sovereign self, as Jung pointed out, behind the archetypes. And that is where God, as it were, the Absolute, Allah, speaks to us each individually. I think this is really a bit like a country. Each country is a microcosm of that. As Plato said, each polis mirrors the psyche. And yet, so the sovereign, in a sense, the image of the crown is the place at which that divine unity touches into our social beingness. And the absolute priority, I think, for a Muslim is to ensure peace and unity. Now, I've recently proposed, my Centre for Peace Policy Research has proposed, that one solution to the Israel-Palestine problem would be for Palestine as a whole, including Gaza and the West Bank, to join the Commonwealth, and for Commonwealth countries, including the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, etc., to fund the rebuilding of their infrastructure, the rebuilding of a port, the rebuilding of a airport, and so on, and to help with the kinds of technological expertise that they're going to need as a state. The Commonwealth includes some states that have really emerged from trauma, like Rwanda, and has tremendous resources at its disposal. A huge number of Muslims live in Commonwealth countries, in India, in Malaysia, in Pakistan. Possibly, the largest political grouping on the planet of nation states that includes Islam would be the Commonwealth. And therefore it seems to me totally appropriate. And I've spoken to senior Palestinian officials. The representative in Britain, Afif Safieh, used to come to meetings of mine in Parliament back in the 90s, who said, look, it's policy of the Palestinian leaders that once independence comes, we would like to join the British Commonwealth. Well, I think this should be put up front and put higher up the agenda. And Commonwealth officials and governments should immediately begin to assist with mediation. And there should be a negotiated solution for the people of Gaza. A UN peacekeeping force, or maybe a Commonwealth peacekeeping force, should go in and protect both sides from each other and help keep peace, literally, which is what a peacekeeping force should do, between the Palestinians of Gaza and the Israelis. And the rockets and so on would have to cease and non-violence be adopted. So an independent state of Palestine, and a state declaring non-violence as its modality, could sign a lasting peace with an independent, autonomous, sovereign state of Israel, and both, as it were, recognise each other simultaneously. I've written about this. It's on Centre for Peace Policy Research. It seems to me the UK has the clout to pull that off in alliance with Commonwealth countries, and I think we have a moral duty to try and pull that off. The only people that I think who would oppose that would be extreme Islamic fanatics who in a sense don't want peace. They seem to want absolute violence ratcheted up to an extreme dimension, and in a sense are on a self-destruct mission. Perhaps, I don't know, perhaps some elements of Hamas or Al-Qaeda types see their mission as death or glory. If they can't, and they have this kind of fantasy they're going to sweep Israel into the sea and negate the last 50 years of history, and Israel will be no more, and they will ride their horses into Jerusalem and claim it as an Islamic city, etc., etc. And if not, then they're going to blow the whole thing up. Now, this is with all due respect, unethical, and unrealistic. I mean, it's heroic, it's romantic, it's kind of El Cid type stuff, but it's not actually going to happen. And what I'm proposing is an extremely pragmatic and concrete way of solving long-term the problems of Palestine and Gaza in a way that is in the interests of the whole world community, because the world is sick and tired of this ethical sore on the landscape. And I think we have to do our bit to solve it. I think we can do it. I've presented a proposal. I know that Canada, my home country, would be 100% behind this proposal and help fund it. It's in the interest of Canada as a nation sworn to peacekeeping and harmony in international relations to ensure that this kind of settlement would reach a successful conclusion. It's in the interest of Pakistan and India, because those are countries that, on the one hand, are sworn to helping their Islamic brethren, in the case of Pakistan, also in India, which has a huge population of Muslims. And the Palestinians are a wonderful people who don't deserve to be suffering in the way that they're doing. Now, if, on the other hand, the Muslims of Scotland say, well, actually, no, we don't want to do any of that kind of stuff. What we want is a totally independent Scotland, and our priority politically is to break up the UK, and we're going to get involved with Scottish nationalism. I despair, because it seems to me that this is a diversion of what authentic Islam is actually about. It's not about promoting the destruction of progressive, democratic, constitutionally peaceful and ordered states into unknown futures where, due to the essentially corruptible nature of politicians, there are inevitably going to be conflicts of status, prestige, money, power, and legal issues. If Scotland breaks away and decides to create its own state in law, it's going to fight every little detail of the treaty with civil servants and lawyers from Whitehall and from the UK. And we're going to see decades of wrangling and unpleasant bantering. These two sides can hardly talk to each other, it seems to me. They don't speak the same language. And there's going to be arguments about how much of the UK debt should be devolved to Scotland, how much of the UK assets, what to do about the UK Defence Forces, etc., etc. Pensions, social security bills. Now, meanwhile, the people of Gaza are burning, and the people of Palestine have no state to call their own. They have no security, and they have no human rights, really. And the people of Iraq are suffering and dying because their state was destroyed through I regard it as an illegal intervention by the US and UK governments on false and ignorant agendas. And I hold Tony Blair and George Bush Jr. personally responsible for this. I think they should be brought before an International Court of Justice. The Chilcot inquiry, which is still being quiet about all this, I look forward with great interest to its final publication, and I think this is a matter of moral concern for every UK citizen. Our armed forces were involved in interfering with the sovereignty of a country, and now we've left it in ruins. I hear regularly from churches in Baghdad and Iraq. In Mosul, there are Christians now being threatened with death unless they convert to Islam. And the girls are being forcibly genitally mutilated, given clitorectomies, as if that's some kind of a trait of Islam, which of course it isn't. It's barbarism and has nothing to do with authentic Islam. So where are the true teachers, where are the true scholars and philosophers of Islam who can go and run the education system of Iraq? Iraq had some of the greatest scholars of Islam, and still does, hiding in the basements. What the UK should be doing is developing a genuine peace policy to help these countries to genuinely apologise for what was done in the name of this country, and by helping bring independence and autonomy and sovereignty to the people of Palestine, we would go some way towards making up this great wrong that was done, and also we would be helping the people of Israel. This isn't an anti-Israeli proposal. On the contrary, my friends in Israel, peace thinkers and philosophers and rabbis and Kabbalists, I've spoken there at conferences and have studied Judaism for many years, I think would be delighted, finally, if peace can be restored between Israel and Palestine and some kind of normality restored to relations between the two peoples. So I think a priority for Muslims and Sufis and all people interested in Islamic philosophy then, keep the country we have. It works pretty well. It needs tweaking. There are injustices, there are problems. Above all, let's get a genuine peace policy in this country. Let's get active in changing the thinking in Whitehall and the Foreign Office to peace thinking rather than militarized thinking. And let's try and advance that place of reconciliation. I mean, one of my long-term dreams for my Centre for Peace Policy Research is I would like to work with Muslim scholars, philosophers, sages and peace activists and have a conference maybe in Istanbul whereby we bring the Sunni and the Shia traditions together and make a formal peace treaty between them. It's time to heal this split. It's ridiculous. The scholars and philosophers on both sides know that it's blasphemous to retain a hatred for other kinds of Muslims rather than a mutual surrender to the absolute. The point of true Islam is surrender to the absolute. As I've explained, that's in a state of love and trembling, as Kierkegaard said, fear and trembling, because the power of the Creator is so vast and we are so small. But we can trust that the words of Muhammad, the revelation that came through the Quran, and all the other great sages and saints of Islam give enough guidance to us to hone in to the place of unity where our individual soul can blend with the absolute, so to speak, and we can follow the right path. And a true Muslim would study both the Sunni tradition and the Shia tradition and see the wisdom in them both, and the Sufi tradition. And this is a lifetime's work. Each Muslim, I taught at the Muslim college with Islamic students who are profoundly intelligent people, graduates of different universities of Syria, of Afghanistan, of Iran, of Britain. And they're still, it's a lifetime study. One can never exhaust the spiritual riches of Islam. Even if one sat down now and tried to read all the books, one could never master it. There has to be a library, a madrasa in heaven, as far as I'm concerned, where true scholars can go and carry on. And I'm sure there is. But one thing I absolutely know is that they will always be teaching unity and peace. And I think countries can act as an agent of that process. And for all its mistakes and for all its errors, and the Iraq War, I think, was possibly the most major error in foreign policy that the UK has ever committed as a country. For all its errors, it nevertheless stands for the presence of the divine in the world, I think. I mean, the flag of the United Kingdom is the crosses conjoined of St Andrew, St George and St Patrick, and I think the Welsh dragon should be stuck in the middle because the Welsh presence in the flag isn't there at the moment. What it's saying by that flag is that we're an island of saints striving to bring light into the world, and that's a mission that we should continue with. And each faith of the people that live in this amazing island that we inhabit, these two islands, each faith that is here enriches our overall understanding and wisdom. It's primarily a Christian country, but there are people from every faith on the planet here now. And each of them brings an untold resource to the United Kingdom as a whole. And Islam and Sufism is one of the many that add to our spiritual richness and don't detract from it. I don't see that splitting up the United Kingdom and going down the route of a kind of nationalist regionalisation of the UK is going to advance the wisdom that we all need to help the planet as a whole. come to its senses and heal up the wounds of war. I now want to move on to another faith which is also present in the United Kingdom, and that's Zoroastrianism, a very ancient and noble religion from Persia. I've spent many years studying Zoroastrianism and have read the Gathas of Zoroaster and the commentaries, the Vendidad and the other scriptures which the Zoroastrians study and have preserved. I mean, it's an amazing ancient religion, going right back probably to about 1700 BC. Zoroaster was one of the earliest prophets living at the time of the Vedas in India, speaking a form of early Indo-Iranian. And these gathas, these hymns that have come down, are very early primal utterances. He was a priest. He was effectively a druid in the ancient Persian culture. And he lived at the same time as the druids were really putting the finishing touches to Stonehenge. It was already 1500 years old at the time Zoroaster appeared. So these islands of Britain were already peopled by advanced seers and sages equivalent to Zoroaster, the druid community. And Zoroaster was should we say, our agent on the job in Persia. He was actually born in Balkh, in what is now in Afghanistan, but travelled widely. And his revelation, he's one of the first people known in history who received a direct revelation from the source, the creator, Ahura Mazda. And the revelation that came to him was that about the nature and function and purpose of human beings. Why are we here on this planet? The cosmological context is as follows. Even before this planet came into being, there was a conflict arose between the creator, Ahura Mazda, and, let's say, the anti-creator, the destructive force, who always seeks to undermine what the creator does. Now, the underminer force is known as Ahriman in Zoroastrian theology. And whenever somebody comes along and creates something beautiful, a child, a book, a city, a castle, Ahriman will always come along and try and corrupt and destroy it. And this happened when planet Earth was created. Ahura Mazda created a beautiful Earth, a paradise, and Ahriman said, no, I'm going to corrupt it, I'm going to destroy it. And this had been going on in all other parts of the universe. Now, the story, the teaching goes as follows, that Ahura Mazda then consulted with his chief archangels, the Ameshashpentas, the great divine archangels, and he asked their advice, what should we do? And they said, well, why don't you create human beings? They will be like little ones of us. We'll put them on this planet, and we'll have this battle out. This is where we will stop and stand and fight Ahriman and defeat him. Because those little human beings, although they're little puny things, we will give them the spirit that can tell the difference between right and wrong. We will give them conscience. We will give them the ability to make right speech, right words, right thought and right deeds. And we will empower them ultimately to choose the right. And together we will then defeat Ahriman. And this will be the battle zone for the entire cosmos, because here on planet Earth, through human beings choosing righteousness and good thought and good mind and good deeds, we will defeat evil forever. Ahura Mazda thought about this and said, isn't that a bit hard on these little creatures, man, that we're thinking of creating? Gosh, that's a big responsibility. We need to give them some help, don't we? And so they all agreed with that. And the help that was agreed would be to send from time to time prophets or sages, people with a kind of supernatural intelligence that would strengthen and awaken the good conscience of mankind. Because people are lazy, people will fall asleep, people won't listen to truth, people start lying, they think it's easy and quick, people will start doing spin and cheating and stealing and so on. So from time to time, Ahura Mazda said, no, I'm going to send a Seoshant, a prophet, a deliverer, a redeemer, who will issue a call of reminding to my dear children, human beings, men and women. And so this is what happened. And Zoroaster, therefore, came as a Seoshant, as a redeemer, and reminded us that our duty is to choose truth and righteousness, and not to fear, not to have fear, to speak out and to live for that truth and righteousness. So, and Zoroaster said, after I've gone, others will come. And Zoroastrianism teaches that one day there will be what's called the Seishant, the next Redeemer. And this concept, the Seishant, actually became the concept of the Messiah in Christian teachings. And the whole idea of Christ emerged from that Zoroastrian concept of the Seishant. Now, not many people know this. This is advanced comparative religious studies, but I've studied this for many years and found this out. If you read Mary Boyce, the great expert on Zoroastrianism, if you talk to Zoroastrian priests, as I've done, and you go to the temples, there's one in Hampstead, very close to the Freud Museum, where Freud ended up living. Wonderful fire temple. They know the story behind Zoroastrian faith. And when I was working in London in advanced interfaith circles, I had many discussions with Zoroastrians and worked with them in Rome and at peace conferences and so on. So, and more recently I had a study day here at the Castle of the Muses on Iranian spirituality, and the leader of the World Zoroastrian Organisation came up and spoke from Oxford. So, the question is then, and the Zoroastrians are still, as it were, hoping and praying for the Seishant, who's going to come and help redeem the world, because this is a cosmic struggle between good and evil. Now, ironically, both Islam, Judaism and Christianity all got this idea of the Messiah figure from the Zoroastrians. My proposal is that if we open the Golden Gate, if we collectively choose to actualize that messianic principle collectively, we can choose peace as a community, as a globe, and stop having what I call these Messiah wars. My Muhammad is better than your Jesus. No, my Moses is better than your Muhammad, etc. Ridiculous Ouroboros chasing its tail. What we need to do is enlighten each other that actually the Messiah is within all of us collectively. And it's time for us to reawaken that Seishant principle. The question before us then is, what does Zoroastrian think about the Scottish independence referendum?